Hey guys, tonight we're going to gently peel back one of history's most persistent and, frankly, most fragrant myths. Imagine, for a moment, the feel of rough wool against your skin, the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the low murmur of voices haggling over the price of dried fish. You are standing at the edge of a medieval town, a place that exists in our minds as a caricature of filth and squalor. The truth, as we will discover, is far more complex, nuanced, and surprisingly clean. Before you get too comfortable though, a small reality check. If you were truly dropped into the 6th century, even in a relatively clean town, the sheer sensory assault of unfamiliar smells, textures and sounds would likely be overwhelming. It's one thing to learn about the past, it's quite another to survive it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love to see where everyone is listening from, so feel free to post your city and what time it is there in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a tentative step forward, your soft-soled leather shoes meeting the damp, packed earth of the main thoroughfare. The myth would have you wading through a river of mud and muck, and while the streets are far from pristine, they aren't the cesspit of legend. You notice that the center of the road is slightly crowned, sloping down toward channels on either side. This is a deliberate design, helping rainwater wash away the day's refuse. Ahead you see a man with a wooden rake and a cart, a raker employed by the town council. It's his job to clear the main streets of the worst of the debris. Animal droppings, discarded scraps from the market stalls, and whatever else has found its way there. It's a constant uphill battle, but it's a battle being fought. Towns took pride in their appearance, and laws often dictated that the area directly in front of your home or business was your responsibility to keep clean. Of course, keeping it clean is a relative term. You definitely have to watch your step a lot more than you do on your paved sidewalk back home. The air itself is a tapestry of smells. You move past the acrid, chemical tang of a tanner's workshop, where hides are being cured, and the smell makes your eyes water slightly. But just a few steps further, that scent is replaced by the warm, wholesome aroma of baking bread, wafting from a communal oven. Then comes the sweet, resinous smell of wood smoke, a constant companion in an age powered by fire. There are less pleasant smells, of course. A pile of fish guts near a fishmonger's stall, the unmistakable odor of a poorly managed drain. But it's a mosaic, not a monolith of stench. The single, overwhelming stink you were expecting is simply not there. Instead, it is the smell of life being lived, close and unfiltered. You find your curiosity piqued. If the streets are not quite the open sewer of fantasy, what about the people themselves? You've always been told they were caked in a lifetime of grime, but as you observe the townsfolk, you see faces washed clean by morning water, hair that, while perhaps not shampoo bottle glossy, has been combed and tied back. You decide to investigate. You've heard whispers of a place where people go to wash, a public bathhouse, or a stew as they're often called. Finding one is you just follow the gentle plumes of steam rising against the cool air, and the sounds of distant, cheerful chatter. Before you even step inside, you pass a smaller, private dwelling. Through an open shutter, you see a woman pouring buckets of steaming water into a large wooden tub set before a crackling hearth. Her children are splashing in it, their laughter echoing in the small room. This, you realize, is the luxury of the moderately well-off. A private bath. It's a laborious process. Hauling the water, heating it over the fire, and then getting rid of it all afterward. But it's an indulgence they clearly cherish. The tub itself is a valuable household item, sometimes passed down through generations. When not in use for bathing, it would be repurposed for washing laundry, or even for salting meat. It's a world away from your ceramic tub with its magical hot and cold taps. You continue on to the public bathhouse, a far more common option for the average townsperson. You pay a small fee at the entrance and step into a large, humid room filled with warm, steamy air. The space is noisy and sociable. Large communal tubs are filled with people of all ages. You see friends chatting, business deals being negotiated, and vendors wandering through, selling snacks and drinks. It's less like a modern spa and more like a community swimming pool and a pub all rolled into one. The water is changed, historians believe, with a fair degree of regularity, though just how often remains a point of scholarly debate. What is clear is that this is not just about getting clean, it is a cornerstone of social life. For a small extra fee, you could hire an attendant to scrub your back, or even have a barber give you a shave and a haircut. The whole experience is surprisingly civilized. But what are they washing with? You edge closer to one of the tubs and see people using handfuls of a plant, rubbing it vigorously between their hands until it creates a lather. You learn this is soapwort, a common plant whose roots and leaves contain natural saponins, creating a gentle sudsy soap when mixed with water. For tougher grime, cakes of actual soap are available. These are made from animal fat, usually mutton, mixed with lye derived from wood ash. It's a harsh, utilitarian soap, nothing like the perfumed bars you're used to, but it does the job. It cuts through the grease and dirt of a day's labor. Some soaps are scented with herbs like lavender or chamomile, which are thrown directly into the bathwater as well. You realize the idea of all-natural, organic skincare isn't a modern invention. It was simply the only option, though some of their all-natural ingredients would raise an eyebrow or two. At a modern farmer's market, clean from the bath, you see people tending to their hair. Meticulously carved combs of wood, bone, or ivory are being drawn through wet strands. These are not just for styling, they are essential tools for hygiene, used to remove dirt, debris, and, yes, the ever-present threat of lice. Delousing was a regular, communal activity, a part of life that was accepted without the shame or horror it might inspire today. In a world without powerful chemical treatments, the simple, mechanical removal with a fine-tooth comb was the most effective method there was. You watch a mother carefully and patiently comb through her daughter's long hair. A quiet moment of care and intimacy in the middle of this bustling public space. It's a poignant reminder that the desire for cleanliness and comfort is a fundamental human constant, transcending time and technology. You came here expecting filth, but you found community, routine, and a surprising dedication to personal hygiene. You step back out into the cool air, your skin still tingling with warmth from the humid bathhouse. The cheerful din of the stews fades behind you, replaced by the familiar sounds of the street. It strikes you then, this ritual of public bathing. It feels both deeply ingrained and strangely familiar, as though its roots run much deeper than the foundations of this medieval town. Your feet, acting on some deep historical instinct, carry you toward the edge of the settlement, past the newer wattle and daub houses, to where the town thins out and older stones lie half buried in the earth. Here, you find the ghost of a different time. It's a ruin, the unmistakable footprint of a Roman villa, or perhaps an old military outpost. As you trace the lines of the low, crumbling walls, you recognize the layout of a bath complex, far grander and more intricate than the simple stew you just left. This, you realize, is the Roman hangover. The immense and sophisticated bathing culture of the Roman Empire didn't simply vanish. When the last legions marched away, it left an echo, a cultural memory that resonated through the centuries. You run your hand over a fragment of mosaic tile, its colors still faintly visible after 1,000 winters. You can almost feel the heat that once radiated from the floor. The Romans were masters of hygiene on an industrial scale. Their bathhouses, the thermae, were monumental structures of public works. They had the caldarium, a hot room so steamy it was like a modern sauna, heated by a massive subterranean furnace whose hot air circulated beneath the floor through a system called a hypocaust. They had the tepidarium, a warm room for transitioning, and the frigidarium, a bracingly cold plunge pool. These weren't just places to get clean. They were civic centers with gymnasiums, libraries, art galleries, and food courts. It was the absolute peak of public bathing. The knowledge wasn't entirely lost. Historians still debate exactly how much of the complex Roman engineering for these hypocaust systems survived into the early Middle Ages. The principle remained. Across the Old Empire, from Britain to the Byzantine East, people continued to seek out the comfort of a hot bath. The scale diminished, the technology simplified, but the tradition endured. The modest medieval stew, with its wooden tubs and single heated room, is a direct, albeit humble, descendant of the magnificent Roman thermae. The idea of bathing as a social, communal activity was a legacy that the so-called Dark Ages never forgot. It was simply adapted, downsized to fit a world of smaller kingdoms and more localized economies. It's a quiet reminder that history is rarely a story of clean breaks and new beginnings. More often, it is a process of carrying old stones to build new walls. Your mind drifts from this public, secular history to a more cloistered world. What happened to hygiene in the places that deliberately shut themselves off from the old Roman society? Your path leads you past the imposing stone wall of a monastery. It's a world apart from the boisterous town. The air here seems calmer, the sounds more measured. A single bell tolling the hour, the scratch of a rake on gravel, the faint sound of chanting from within the chapel. It's easy to imagine this as a place that rejected worldly comforts, a place where the mortification of the flesh meant abandoning cleanliness. But you'd be mistaken. Through a heavy, arched gateway, you get a glimpse of life inside. What you see surprises you. In a covered walkway surrounding a central garden, you see a long stone basin, beautifully carved, with several spouts from which clean water trickles. This is the lavatorium, the communal washing place of the monastery. Here, the monks perform their daily ablutions, washing their hands and faces before meals and prayers. It is not an act of indulgence, but one of ritual purity, a physical manifestation of a clean soul. You see a row of simple linen towels hanging neatly on wooden pegs, one for each brother. You learn that life within these walls is highly regulated by a set of rules, the most famous being the rule of Saint Benedict. And these rules often contain specific instructions for hygiene. While excessive, luxurious bathing might be discouraged as a form of vanity, necessary washing was mandated. Many monastic orders required the brothers to have a full bath several times a year, often before major holidays like Christmas and Easter. They were to change their straw bedding frequently and had designated laundry days for their habits and undergarments. Special chambers were set aside for bloodletting, a common medical procedure after which a monk was often granted extra rest and a restorative bath. The abbot had his own private washroom, not necessarily out of luxury, but reflecting his status and the need to host important guests. For the monks, cleanliness wasn't next to godliness. It was an integral part of it. The orderly, scheduled hygiene of the monastery stands in stark contrast to the spontaneous, commercialized fun of the town stew, yet both are striving toward the same end: a clean body. As dusk begins to settle, painting the sky in shades of violet and gray, your thoughts return to the public bathhouse in the center of town. The day is ending for the craftspeople and laborers, and it's a popular time to wash away the grime of their work. You find yourself drawn back to the stews. A name you now understand has a complex history. It comes from the stoves used to heat the water and the steam rooms, but over time, it's acquired a secondary, more colorful meaning. You step back into the warm, damp air. The atmosphere is even more convivial than before. The steam is thick with a mingled sense of soapwort, herbs, sweat, and spilled wine. This is where the social aspect truly comes alive. In one corner, two merchants are sharing a floating wooden board, using it to play a game of chess. In another tub, A group of apprentices are laughing loudly, splashing water with a boisterous energy that gets them a mild scolding from the bath attendant. Vendors are still present, now selling small meat pies and ale, which people consume right there in the tubs. An attendant, a man with strong arms and a rough cloth, offers you a vigorous back scrubbing for an extra coin. A barber has set up a chair near the entrance, offering shaves and trims, the steam helping to soften the patrons' beards. But you also notice glances being exchanged and quiet arrangements being made in the corners. You understand now why the church was beginning to have a complicated relationship with these places. The stews were hubs of all human life, which included activities that moralists frowned upon. Their association with drinking, gambling, and prostitution was becoming more pronounced. They were on the fringes of polite society, a gray area where different social classes mingled with a freedom rarely seen elsewhere, and where desires of all kinds could be met. It's not quite the den of iniquity that some preachers would claim, but it's certainly not the sanitized, family-friendly wellness center you might imagine a spa to be. It is messy, human, and complicated. A place for a knight to soak his weary limbs, a weaver to negotiate a deal, and a sinner to find temptation, all in the very same warm water. The noise and steam of the stew, that complex human tapestry of commerce, community, and carnality, begin to feel a world away from where you find yourself now. Your wanderings have led you to a castle, its immense stone walls rising to meet the darkening sky. Within its protective embrace, in a small, quiet chapel, a different kind of bathing ritual is underway. There is no laughter here, no splashing, no vendors hawking pies and ale. There is only a profound, devotional silence, punctuated by the soft whisper of linen and the gentle lapping of water. Before you is a young squire, his long years of training in horsemanship, in weaponry, in the codes of service, all culminating in this single, sacred night. He is preparing for his accolade, the ceremony that will transform him from a boy into a knight. His bath is central to this transformation. He stands in a wooden tub, but it has been carefully prepared, lined with clean white cloth to protect him from the rough wood. The water is steaming, but it isn't merely heated. It's been infused with herbs and flower petals, rose, lavender, and chamomile, not just for their pleasant scent, but for their symbolic properties of purity, courage, and tranquility. 2 older, established knights attend to him, not as servants, but as sponsors. They pour the warm, fragrant water over his shoulders from silver ewers. This is not about scrubbing away dirt. The squire would have cleaned himself of common grime before even beginning this process. No, this is a ritual of purification. He is washing away his past life, his youthful follies, his worldly attachments. He is being made clean, not just in body, but in spirit, preparing himself to take sacred vows. Once the ceremonial washing is complete, he is dried with fine linen towels and dressed in a simple white tunic, the color of innocence, and over this, he will don a red robe symbolizing the blood he is now willing to shed in the name of his Lord and his faith. Finally, a black outer coat is draped over him, a stark reminder of the death that awaits all mortals, knights included. He will then spend the entire night alone in this chapel, in a prayerful vigil before the altar where his new sword and spurs have been placed. This solemn, introspective bath is the absolute antithesis of the public stew. It is private, deeply spiritual, and utterly silent. It is a reminder that in this world, water holds a powerful, dual significance. It can be a vessel for social connection and worldly pleasure, but also a medium for profound spiritual cleansing. This very duality is at the heart of the medieval church's complicated stance on bathing. You can now see the dilemma with perfect clarity. How can an institution that holds baptism, the ultimate act of purification with holy water, as a central sacrament, be entirely against bathing? It can't. But it could, and it did, cast a wary eye on the circumstances surrounding it. You can almost hear the sermon of a fiery local priest echoing in your mind. He thunders from the pulpit about the stews, calling them dens of sin and gateways to damnation. And from his perspective, standing in a world of temptation, he isn't entirely wrong. He preaches against the sin of vanity, of spending too much time and money adorning the body, which is merely a temporary vessel for the soul. He warns against the gluttony of feasting and drinking in the tubs, and most fiercely against the lust that is provoked by the casual nudity and intermingling of the sexes that often occurred in these public spaces. These moral objections were a constant undercurrent. For centuries, various clerical writers and bishops condemned the more licentious aspects of bathhouse culture. They saw the steam and warmth and intimacy as a recipe for moral decay. Historians still argue about how effective this clerical frowning actually was. Did these sermons actually lead to a decline in bathing, or were they simply a form of religious grandstanding that the average person mostly ignored? Much like modern-day finger-wagging about the evils of pop music or video games, for a long time, it seems most people carried on as they were, taking the church's warnings with a grain of salt. They went to confession on Sunday, and then enjoyed a good soak and a chat at the stews on Monday. But the church did manage to effect some change. Over time, in many towns, regulations became stricter. Male and female bathing were often segregated to different days or different establishments altogether. Some bathhouses tried to clean up their reputation, banning the sale of alcohol and cracking down on the more overt forms of solicitation. The church's attitude fostered a slow-brewing suspicion around public baths, a sense that while pleasant, if not entirely wholesome, it's this simmering distrust, this association of public bathing with potential sin and moral weakness, that laid the groundwork for the more drastic changes that were to come. It wasn't a ban, not yet, but it was a cooling of the waters, a slow turning of the tide against a centuries-old tradition, leaving the common world of public stews and clerical condemnations behind. Your journey now takes you into the most rarefied of atmospheres, the private chambers of the nobility and even royalty. If the squire's bath was one of spiritual luxury, a king's bath is one of pure, unadulterated material comfort. You find yourself in the solar of a great lord, a private room high in the castle keep. A fire roars in a great stone hearth, casting a warm, golden light across rich tapestries. In the center of the room stands the bath. It's not a crude wooden barrel, but a carefully constructed tub, perhaps padded and lined with an expensive cloth, almost like an upholstered piece of furniture. A tent-like canopy of silk or wool is often erected over it, trapping the steam and heat, creating a private, cozy little microclimate against the drafty reality of a stone castle. This is bathing as an art form, a display of status. The water is perfectly heated, carried up flights of stairs by a line of servants. It's scented not with common soapwort, but with expensive imported goods, cloves, musk, and fragrant oils purchased from Venetian merchants. The king, or duke, or powerful countess reclines in the tub, while attendants stand by. One might wash their hair with a special herbal infusion. Another might gently scrub their back. Yet another holds a silver cup of cooled, spiced wine for them to sip. This isn't a quick wash. It is a prolonged, leisurely experience, designed for maximum pleasure and relaxation. They might even have a musician playing a lute softly in the corner of the chamber. And this luxury was not confined to a single location. In a surprising little tidbit of historical fact, you learn that kings and high-ranking nobles often traveled with their bathtubs. When a monarch went on a progress through their kingdom, their luggage train would be miles long, a moving city of people and possessions, and in that train, alongside the treasure chests, the portable chapel, and the furniture, would be the royal bathtub, bathing cloths, water heaters, and the specialized servants whose sole job was to prepare the royal bath at the end of a long day's journey. It's an almost comical image, an army of retainers setting up a sophisticated spa experience in the middle of a muddy field or a provincial castle. But it speaks volumes about how much they valued this comfort. It demonstrates, without a doubt, that far from avoiding water, the medieval elite saw a luxurious, private bath as a rite of their station, a necessary indulgence, and a powerful symbol of their wealth and refinement. They weren't just clean, they were performatively, extravagantly clean. You find yourself in a comfortable world. A world that has, for centuries, understood the pleasure and utility of water. You have seen it in the ritual of the night, in the luxury of the king, and in the noisy, communal joy of the town stews. This is a society that bathes, but as you relax into this sense of established normalcy, a cold wind begins to blow, carrying whispers from the east. It speaks of a great pestilence, a sickness that moves like wildfire, leaving devastation in its wake. At first, it is a distant rumor, a fantastic tale told by sailors and merchants arriving in the ports of Italy, something that happens to other people far away. But the wind blows stronger, and the whispers become terrified shouts. Sometime in the middle of the 14th century, the world you've come to understand breaks. The Black Death arrives. The change is not gradual. It is a cataclysm, a seismic shock that shatters the very foundations of medieval life. The cheerful, bustling town you wandered through earlier falls silent. The blacksmith's hammer ceases its ringing clang. The market stalls are empty, their vendors either dead or fled. Entire families disappear behind closed doors, doors marked with a stark red or white cross. The air, once a tapestry of smells both pleasant and foul, is now uniformly thick with a new scent, the cloying sweetness of funerary herbs and the terrifying, omnipresent odor of decay. Fear is a physical presence on the street, as tangible as the abandoned carts and the untended animals that wander aimlessly. Life, which was once lived so publicly, has retreated into a state of terrified isolation. In the face of a cataclysm that defies all explanation, people are desperate for a cause, for any reason at all that might give them some small measure of control. Their desperate search for an explanation leads them not to microscopes and unseen bacteria, but to the best medical knowledge they have. It leads them to the university-trained physicians, men who have studied the ancient texts of Galen and Hippocrates. These learned men look at the pattern of death. They consider the environment, and they arrive at a conclusion born of centuries of medical theory. The pestilence, they declare, is carried on the air itself. It is a miasma, a poisonous vapor, a corrupted atmosphere that rises from swamps, from decaying matter, and from the unfortunate alignment of the planets. This miasma, this bad air, is invisible, but you can sometimes smell its foulness. It enters the body and sickens it from within. It's a theory that, without the knowledge of germ theory, makes a terrifying amount of sense. And it is here, in this moment of collective terror, that the relationship with water suffers a catastrophic break. Your mind turns back to the public bathhouse, to the great clouds of steam billowing from its vents. Remember the feeling of the warm, humid air on your skin, the way it opens up your pores. In an age before the plague, this was a feeling of health, of cleansing, of relaxation. Now, through the lens of miasma theory, it becomes something sinister. The physicians explain, with an authority that few would dare question, that sitting in a hot bath, surrounded by steam, is one of the most dangerous things you can do. The heat and moisture open the pores of your skin wide, creating thousands of tiny gateways. And through these defenseless portals, the deadly miasma can pour directly into your body, bypassing your lungs and overwhelming your system. It is a tragic, fatal piece of logic. The very act that was a cornerstone of social life and hygiene is now reframed as a reckless invitation to death. Imagine being a regular patron of the stews, a place you associated with friendship and well-being. Now you are told that this simple pleasure is a death trap. Suddenly, that feeling of the warm steam enveloping you is no longer comforting. It's menacing. The aha moment for you isn't that they were foolish, but that they were rational. They were following the best science of their day. You begin to understand why the very idea of submerging yourself in hot water would become an object of fear. It was, from their perspective, an act of supreme foolishness. Some physicians went so far as to suggest that a good layer of grime, sweat, and oil from one's own body could actually be protective, clogging the pores and forming a defensive barrier against the poisoned air. It's a bitter irony that the prescription for health became the avoidance of the very thing that made them feel clean. The consequences of this new medical consensus are swift and brutal. The same town councils that once employed rakers to keep the streets tidy now turn their attention to a new public menace. The bathhouses, one by one, the stews are shuttered. You walk past the establishment you visited earlier. The door is barred shut, the windows boarded over. The cheerful sign depicting a wooden tub is gone. There is no steam rising from the roof, no sound of chatter or splashing from within. It is silent, dead. Its closure is framed as a matter of public health. Officials declare that these places are magnets for the miasma and must be closed to protect the populace. And in this, the authorities find a convenient ally in the church. Those priests who for years had been preaching against the moral dangers of the stews now feel grimly vindicated. They can now add a deadly physical peril to their sermons. The bathhouses are not only gateways to hell in the next life, they are now proven to be gateways to the grave in this one. This perfect storm of medical theory and moral panic is what truly brings the age of public bathing to a crashing halt. Historians might quibble over whether it was the plague alone or the pre-existing religious objections that did them in, but for the common person on the street, the result is the same. The public bath is gone. This fear lingers long after the first and most vicious wave of the plague subsides. For the next several centuries, Europe will be a profoundly different place in its relationship to hygiene. The tradition of communal, recreational bathing, a thread connecting this society all the way back to the Roman Empire, has been severed. It is not an exaggeration to say that an entire culture of water was lost. It was driven indoors, made private, and became far less common. People still sought cleanliness, but they would now have to find new ways to achieve it, ways that didn't involve opening their pores to a world that suddenly seemed filled with invisible, airborne death. The fragrant steam of the royal bath and the raucous steam of the public stew have both evaporated, leaving behind a continent holding its breath, terrified of what the very air might contain. You are now in a post-plague world, a world where the fear of that invisible, airborne poison lingers in the collective memory. The great bathhouses are shuttered ghosts, their tubs repurposed or left to rot. The very idea of communal bathing, once a weekly ritual, now seems like a reckless practice from a distant, naive past. The memory of miasma, of death entering through the open pores of the skin, has fundamentally rewired society's approach to hygiene. Yet, the human desire to be clean has not vanished. It has simply been redirected. If you cannot safely cleanse the body's surface with water, what can you do? The answer, you discover, lies not in water, but in cloth. You observe the people of this new era. From the wealthy merchant to the humble artisan, there is a newfound obsession with what lies beneath their outer garments. Welcome to the great age of linen. Underneath the heavy wool tunics, the leather doublets, and the silk gowns, everyone who can afford it wears a layer of fine, clean, white linen. This is the new marker of personal hygiene. A person's true state of cleanliness is no longer judged by whether they have recently soaked in a tub, but by the state of their chemise, their undershirt, their coif. These undergarments are expected to be changed frequently, daily if possible. The thinking, in a strange echo of that protective grime theory, is that the linen layer will absorb the dirt, sweat, and oils produced by the body. It acts as a wick, drawing the filth away from the skin. To be clean, then, is to put on a fresh, snow-white shirt. This shift has a profound visual and social impact. Look at the formal portraits of the nobility from this period. Notice how artists take great care to paint the little frills of a pristine white undershirt peeking out at the cuffs and collar. This is not just a fashion statement, it's a declaration of cleanliness and, therefore, of wealth and status. Linen was labor-intensive to produce, and keeping a large supply of it, white, required constant, vigorous laundering. It was a full-time job for servants. So, that flash of white cloth was a subtle signal to the world, I am so wealthy. I can afford to keep this much fabric sparkling clean, protecting me from my own impurities. The aha moment for you is realizing that hygiene became a form of laundry management. You could go weeks or even months without a full body bath. But if your linen was fresh, you were considered clean and civil. Of course, this focus on linen didn't solve the problem of odor. While the undergarments absorbed sweat, the smells of a tightly packed, unwashed society still remained. The battle against miasma now extended to a battle against all unpleasant odors, which were believed to be a sign of the air's corruption. This led to a golden age of personal fragrances. You step into the shop of an apothecary, and your senses are overwhelmed by a heady mix of scents. Shelves are lined with glass bottles of distilled flower waters. Rosewater and orange flower water are particularly prized. These are not dabbed delicately on the wrist. People douse their clothing and handkerchiefs with them. They are used to wash the hands and face, offering a dry form of ablution that cleanses and perfumes without the danger of opening the pores with hot water. You see a wealthy woman examining a pomander. It's a beautiful, intricate piece of metalwork, a small sphere of gold or silver that opens into segments like an orange. Each segment is filled with a paste made of solid perfumes and exotic spices. Ambergris, a strange and fantastically expensive substance from the digestive tract of a sperm whale, musk from the glands of a musk deer, civet, cloves, and cinnamon. These are not merely perfumes to make one smell good, they are personal air purifiers. The pomander is worn on a chain around the neck or dangling from a belt. When passing through a particularly smelly street or entering a crowded room, its owner would hold it to their nose, breathing in its powerful protective scent, and, they believed, warding off the dangerous miasma. It's a personal anti-plague device, a fragrant force field. It's a world where your personal scent bubble is a matter of life and death. So where does this leave actual bathing? It has not vanished completely, but it has become a very different beast. It's largely a private, infrequent, and often medically prescribed affair. The common person might resort to a quick sponge bath, with a cloth dipped in cold water, focusing on the hands, face, and armpits. A full body immersion in hot water is now something to be done with caution. Sure, it might be prescribed by a physician to treat a specific ailment, like sore joints. In these cases, it would be done in a private room, with the windows sealed shut to keep out the bad air. Once the bath was over, the person would be quickly dried and bundled into bed to sweat, which was believed to expel the illness, and also, conveniently, any miasma that might have snuck in. Slowly, very slowly, as the most devastating waves of the plague faded into history and the immediate terror subsided, water begins to creep back into everyday life. You see the tentative beginnings of its return. A few brave souls might begin to enjoy a quick dip in a river during the height of summer. The extremely wealthy might still indulge in an occasional, private, perfumed bath. But the grand social tradition of the public stews is gone for good, a casualty of the Black Death. A quirky historical tidbit from this era is the rise of the dry shampoo concept, where people would use powdered clays or starches to degrease their hair without water. Yet another innovation born of fear. As the centuries roll on and as scientific understanding slowly begins to advance, the fear of water will recede. By the shoe bath century, a renewed interest in hydrotherapy for health will emerge. Bathe, with the dawn of germ theory, the connection between water, soap, and the prevention of disease will finally be understood, leading to the public sanitation movements and the bathrooms we know today. You have journeyed from a world where bathing was a social cornerstone, through its dark association with sin and death, to its rebirth as an act of textile management. The myth of the perpetually filthy medieval person dissolves not into a simple truth, but into a complex, evolving story. They bathed, then for very logical reasons they stopped, and then slowly they learned to bathe again. Bathe, as you stand on the cusp of this new understanding, ready to return to your own time with its effortless hot showers and sanitized soaps, you look back at the resilient figures of the past. They weren't dirtier, they were just navigating a different reality, fighting their invisible demons with the best weapons they had, be it a steam bath, a prayer, a clean linen shirt, or a bowl of fragrant spice. What did the Vikings actually eat and drink? It is before dawn, but the darkness has a soft silvered edge. You can feel a persistent chill rising from the packed earth floor of the longhouse, a deep cold that has settled into the very bones of the land. Outside, a lone bird calls into the quiet, and you can hear the gentle, rhythmic breathing of your family sleeping on the benches that line the walls. The air is thick with the ghosts of yesterday's smells: old wood smoke, damp wool, sleeping humans, and the faintest, surest hint of milk that has just begun to turn. There is no alarm clock, no jarring alert, only the slow, internal clock that tells you the livestock will soon be stirring, and the day's first, and perhaps most important, task is at hand: breakfast. You swing your legs off the bench, your bare feet meeting the cold, hard ground. There's a soft rustle as you pull on a simple woolen tunic. Moving through the gloom, you make your way to the heart of the longhouse, the long, rectangular fire pit that runs down its center. A few stubborn orange embers pulse weakly under a blanket of gray ash. It's your job to revive them. You carefully add small, dry twigs, leaning in close and blowing gently. Your breath, a small cloud in the frigid air. The embers glow brighter, a fragile web of orange light, and slowly a tiny flame licks upwards, hungry for more fuel. You add a larger piece of dried peat, maybe even a chunk of dried animal dung if wood is scarce. A remarkably efficient, if not pleasantly fragrant, fuel source. With the fire rekindled, its warmth beginning to push back the oppressive cold, your thoughts turn to food. Forget the sprawling breakfasts of the modern world, the towers of pancakes, or the endless varieties of cereal. Your morning meal is a study in stoic simplicity. Hanging from a hook above the growing fire is a heavy, soot-blackened iron cauldron. Inside is what remains of last night's meal, and what will become this morning's porridge, or perhaps more accurately, a kind of perpetual stew. This isn't the creamy, sweet oatmeal you might imagine. This is grout, a thick, hearty pottage made from whatever grains are on hand. You take a horn spoon and give it a stir. It's dense, almost solid. The primary ingredient is likely barley, the hardiest of the cereals grown this far north. It was tough, resilient, and could survive the short, unpredictable growing seasons. Alongside it, you might find rye with its earthy, slightly sour flavor, and oats, which helped to thicken the mixture. These grains were everything. They were the bedrock of your diet, the fuel for a life of hard physical labor. You add a splash of water from a wooden bucket to loosen the mixture, and perhaps a handful of crushed barley to extend it, before hanging the cauldron back over the fire to warm through. The smell begins to fill the longhouse, nutty, grainy, and deeply unpretentious. This is the aroma of sustenance. While it heats, you might glance towards the sacks of grain stored in a corner of the house. You know the back-breaking work that went into filling them. You remember the spring planting, walking behind a simplard, a scratch plow. Really, that did little more than score a shallow line in the rocky soil. You remember the endless summer days spent weeding, chasing away hungry birds, and praying for just the right amount of rain. And you remember the harvest, the frantic race against the turning of the seasons, cutting the stalks with a small iron sickle, bundling them, and then the long, dusty process of threshing and winnowing. Every single spoonful of this bland, grey porridge represents an enormous investment of time and sweat. As your family begins to stir, awakened by the flickering firelight and the promise of a warm meal, you might think about the other foods that come from your own small world, your farmstead. Just outside the longhouse is the kalgatha, a modest vegetable enclosure, its name literally meaning cabbage patch. Wine, and it's an apt name. It is filled with the ancestors of cabbage and kale, tough, leafy greens that could withstand a sudden frost. Let's be honest, kale was a Viking Age survival food, long before it became a early 16th century health food cliché. They likely weren't massaging it with lemon juice and olive oil to make a light summer salad. This was a workhorse green, destined to be chopped and thrown into the perpetual pottage in the cauldron, its bitterness mellowing as it stewed alongside root vegetables like onions, leeks, and turnips. You might also have a patch of hardy peas or beans, their dried forms adding precious protein to the diet, especially during the long, lean winters. Beyond the cabbage patch is the lowing and bleating of your wealth, the livestock. These aren't the hulking, specialized breeds of the modern era. Historians still argue whether the Viking Age cow was a direct ancestor to modern Nordic breeds or a distinct type that has since vanished. But what is certain is that they were small, shaggy, and incredibly resilient. Your family's cow, grazing in the misty field, is a treasure. She provides the most vital of liquids, after water, milk, and that milk is the foundation for a cascade of other foods. Fresh milk is a fleeting luxury, something you'd drink right after the morning milking, but most of it is destined for preservation. You'd pour it into a shallow wooden trough and leave it to sit. The cream would rise to the top, and you would skim it off day after day, collecting it in a churn. The churning of butter was a constant, rhythmic chore. Once you had a firm, pale yellow mass, you would press it, salt it heavily to keep it from spoiling, and store it in a wooden tub, sometimes even burying it in a bog for safekeeping over the winter. The bog's cool, anaerobic environment would preserve the butter for months, though it might take on a peculiar, pungent flavor, an acquired taste to be sure. What was left behind after skimming the cream was skim milk. You wouldn't waste a drop by adding a starter culture, a bit of the previous day's batch, an endless chain stretching back through generations. Not unlike a modern sourdough starter, you would encourage it to ferment and separate. This is how you make skyr. You gently heat the soured milk until it curdled into thick, white clumps, then strain it through a linen cloth. The liquid that drained away, the whey, was a sour but valuable byproduct, sometimes drunk as is, or used for pickling or as a base for soups. The solids left in the cloth were the skyr itself, a thick, tangy, high-protein food that was somewhere between a yogurt and a soft cheese. It could be eaten plain, perhaps with a handful of summer berries, or stored for later use. It was a simple, ingenious method for converting perishable milk into a stable, long-lasting source of nourishment. Alongside your few cows, you'd have a small flock of hardy, independent sheep and goats, valued as much for their wool and hide as for their meat and milk. And then there were the pigs, snuffling and rooting near the edge of the woods, happily fattening themselves on household scraps and forest mast. And we mustn't forget the birds. Shuffling around the yard would be a flock of chickens, or more accurately, their smaller, scrappier ancestors, and perhaps some geese. Their eggs were a precious, seasonal treat, a welcome burst of richness, fried in a pan with a knob of that salty butter. So, as you finally sit down on the bench, a wooden bowl of the warm, thick grout cupped in your hands, you look at this simple meal not as a gourmet experience, but as the culmination of your entire world. It's the grain from the field, the water from the well, maybe a knob of butter from the family cow, all warmed over a fire you yourself rekindled from yesterday's embers. It is humble, repetitive, and deeply connected to the land you occupy. It's the very taste of survival. Girl? The sun climbs higher, and the morning chill has finally surrendered to a thin, watery warmth. The daily chores are done. The cow has been milked, the chickens fed, the fences checked. On any other day, you would now turn to the larger tasks, mending a tool, weaving on the loom, or heading out to the fields. But today, a different energy thrums in the air, a feeling of anticipation. Down the muddy track that connects your farm to the wider world, you can see figures approaching. Cousins from the next farm over, an uncle from the settlement near the fjord. Today is not a day for quiet subsistence. It's a day for a feast. The central fire in the longhouse, which you so carefully nursed to life for the morning porridge, is now a roaring inferno. More peat, more logs have been piled on, sending a thick column of smoke billowing up towards the smoke hole in the roof. The heavy, soot-stained cauldron has been scrubbed clean of the last remnants of grout and set aside. In its place, something far grander is happening. Your father and uncle have rigged a spit over the largest part of the fire pit, and on it, impaled and slowly turning, is a whole pig. You watch as the skin begins to blister and crisp, the fat beneath rendering and dripping into the fire with an aggressive, satisfying sizzle. Each drop ignites in a flash of orange flame, sending up a puff of fragrant pork-scented smoke. This is the scent of celebration. Pork was a feasting favorite, a meat associated with prosperity and even the gods. This animal, which spent its life rooting happily in the woods behind your home, is now the guest of honor, its sacrifice marking the importance of this gathering. An older cow, perhaps one no longer able to give milk or pull a plow, might also be slaughtered for such an event. Its tougher meat, destined for the other great feasting vessel, the bubbling stew pot. And what a stew it is! A cauldron, larger than the one for the daily porridge, bubbles merrily at one end of the fire. The basics are there. The familiar cabbage, onions, and turnips from your garden. But today they are merely the supporting cast. The star is the meat, hacked into generous chunks and browned in its own fat before being submerged. Into this rich broth goes anything and everything that could elevate it from mere sustenance to something joyous. A handful of wild garlic, its pungent aroma cutting through the fatty richness. Perhaps some tangy sorrel or ground ivy foraged from the forest's edge. Every stir of the long-handled ladle brings new treasures to the surface. A chunk of beef, a sweet slice of turnip, a softening leek. This is scousers, the Vikings' hearty, all-in-one feast meal. A proper scouse was a point of pride, a reflection of the household's wealth and generosity. While this magnificent culinary display unfolds over the fire, another special activity is taking place on the cooler, flat stones of the hearth. On a normal day, your diet is largely breadless. The grain from your fields is too precious to be used so liberally every day. It's better stretched out in the form of porridge. But a feast without bread is hardly a feast at all. Your mother is kneeling on the floor, her hands dusted with flour. The flour itself is a luxury. It's not the fine, white powder of the modern age. It is coarse, full of bran and grit, stone ground with a small hand quern. Two circular stones, one spun on top of the other, a slow and laborious process. She mixes barley and rye flour with water and a pinch of salt, kneading it into a stiff dough. She then pinches off small balls, flattens them between her palms into thin, rough circles, and lays them directly on a heated flagstone. These are flatbreads, the simplest and most common bread of your time. They cook quickly, puffing up slightly before being flipped with a pair of wooden tongs. The air fills with the warm, toasty smell of baking grain. For a truly special occasion, she might make a leavened loaf. There's no commercial yeast, of course. The rising agent could be a fiercely guarded lump of dough, saved from a previous baking, or even the frothy scum skimmed from the top of a vat of fermenting ale. A wonderful, symbiotic relationship between baker and brewer. These heavier, denser loaves are not baked on an open hearth, but in a special dome-shaped clay or stone oven built outside the longhouse, a piece of infrastructure not every family was fortunate enough to have. The finished loaf would be heavy, dark, and sour, a world away from a modern brioche, but to you, it is the height of rustic luxury. You could use a slice of it as a trencher, an edible plate to soak up the juices from the stew. A perfect, zero-waste system that didn't require an Instagram post to validate its existence. As more guests arrive, the longhouse fills with the boisterous sounds of greetings and laughter. The real social lubricant of the evening is brought out. The drinks, water is for the field and the everyday chore. A feast is for ale. Large wooden buckets of it are carried in, and the air thickens with its malty, slightly sweet aroma. This is Öl, the cornerstone of Viking-age social life. It's a beverage you likely helped to make. You'd have watched the barley being malted, spread out on the floor of a warm room, sprinkled with water until it began to sprout, then quickly dried in a kiln to halt the process. This trick unlocked the sugars in the grain. This malted barley was then mashed with hot water, creating a sweet liquid called wort, which was then boiled. Since hops weren't widely used in Scandinavia yet for flavoring and preservation, other botanicals might have been added. The bitter, aromatic leaves of bog myrtle were common, or perhaps some juniper branches, lending a piney note to the brew. After boiling, it would cool and be poured into a massive wooden vat to ferment. You'd throw in a special ale stick, a carved piece of wood that carried the family's own unique strain of yeast from one batch to the next. The resulting ale was not the clear, filtered beer of today. It was thick, cloudy, and full of sediment, a liquid bread that provided as many calories as it did cheer. You wouldn't just drink it, you would, in a way, eat it. And then, for the chieftain, the guest of honor, or for the toasts that mark the most solemn oaths, something even more special is produced. A smaller, more ornate cask is tapped, and from it comes a golden, shimmering liquid. Mead, the legendary M.J. Doother of sagas and myths. Unlike ale, which comes from the cultivated field, mead comes from the wild sweetness of honey, a far rarer and more precious resource. Making it was simpler in theory. Mix honey with water and let it ferment, but acquiring the honey was the difficult part. It meant either carefully tending to hives of bees in woven skeps, or undertaking the dangerous task of raiding a wild hive high in a tree. As the sweet, potent liquid is poured into polished drinking horns, you can understand why it was considered the drink of the gods. However, historians still argue whether mead was a common drink for the average Viking. Farmer, or a rare luxury enjoyed almost exclusively by the chieftain class. Its fame in the poetry, perhaps outweighing its actual prevalence on the feasting table. You find a place on the bench between your cousins, a wooden bowl of the rich, meaty skulls in your lap, and a chunk of the dense, dark bread in your hand. An ale horn is passed your way, and you take a deep, earthy swig. The pork is being carved now, its crispy skin crackling under the blade of a long knife. You eat with your fingers and a personal knife. The fork is a bizarre foreign invention you've never seen. It's messy, chaotic, and glorious. Your loud uncle is already telling a story that gets grander with every horn of ale he drains. You watch him, thinking that some things, like boastful uncles at family gatherings, are probably constant throughout human history. The warmth of the fire, the fullness in your belly, and the heady buzz from the ale create a deep sense of contentment. This is what all the hard work is for. This is community. This is wealth. This is the flavor of joy. The morning after the feast is a world of quiet contrasts. Where yesterday there was the roar of fire and boisterous laughter, today there is only a profound, muffled silence in the longhouse. The air is heavy and stale, a potent cocktail of cold ash, spilled ale, and the lingering ghost of roasted pork fat. Your head feels thick, a gentle but persistent echo of last night's celebratory mead. Outside, the world seems too bright, the sounds of the farm animals too sharp. The daily rhythm of chores feels tedious after the excitement, and the thought of another bowl of grainy porridge does little to inspire you. You need a different kind of quiet, the kind found only in the untamed world that presses in on all sides of your small, cultivated clearing. You reach for your bow, carved from a single stave of yew, its wood smooth and familiar in your grip. You check the sinew string, then slide a half-dozen arrows into a simple leather quiver. Your aim today isn't necessarily to bring down a great stag, though the thought of it is a pleasing fantasy. The goal is simpler: to walk the forest paths, to reacquaint yourself with the silence, and to see what gifts the wild might offer up. Your family's farm provides the reliable bedrock of your diet: the grains, the greens, the milk. But the forest and the sea offer the thrilling notes of culinary surprise. Stepping out of the longhouse and past the vegetable patch, you enter the deep, hushed world of the woods. Sunlight struggles to pierce the dense canopy, dappling the mossy ground in shifting patterns of green and gold. The air is cool and smells of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the sharp, clean scent of pine. Your footsteps make almost no sound on the thick carpet of needles. This is a different kind of work from farming. It's not about brute force and repetition, it's about patience, observation, and an intimate understanding of the landscape. You pass a snare you set yesterday, a cunning loop of twisted cordage hidden along a rabbit run. It is empty. Such is the way of the hunter. It's a game of probabilities. Bringing home a fat hare for the stew pot is always a welcome victory, but you never count on it. Unlike a turnip, which has the decency to stay right where you planted it, wild game is frustratingly uncooperative. You continue on, your eyes scanning the trees for a glimpse of a grouse, or listening for the rustle of a wild boar in the undergrowth. You see tracks, the cloven hoofprints of a deer that passed this way hours ago, but you are not a chieftain with a hunting party and hounds. You are one person, hoping for a small moment of opportunity. As you walk, your hunter's eye becomes a forager's eye. The forest floor and the thickets at its edge are a hidden pantry, if you know what to look for. In the late summer and autumn, these woods would be jeweled with color. You'd find patches of wild bilberries, their dark skins dusting your fingers blue as you gather them. Tart lingonberries, which pair so perfectly with rich, fatty meat, would hang in crimson clusters. And in the marshy ground near a stream, you might find the most prized berry of all, the cloudberry, glowing with a soft amber light, each one a bite of honeyed, subarctic sunshine. You also keep an eye out for hazelnuts, a small pouch of which could provide a wonderful, fatty richness when pounded and stirred into a pottage. And of course, there are mushrooms. You move a piece of rotting birch bark with your foot, revealing a small colony. You study them carefully. Some are a source of delicious, savory flavor. Others are a source of a very swift and permanent retirement from the feasting circuit. Knowing the difference is one of the most important lessons your mother taught you. Your search for supplementary food is not limited to tasty morsels. On the bark of a tree, you spot a growth of lichen, a strange, frilly organism known as Iceland moss. This is a fringe food, a taste of desperation. It's inedible raw, but you know that if the grain harvest ever failed, if the winter stores ran dangerously low, you could boil this lichen for hours and hours with ash until it breaks down into a thick, black gelatinous goo. It's a famine food, a provider of raw calories when all else is lost, a quirky and slightly grim secret of survival. Eventually, the trees begin to thin, and the smell of the air changes. The earthy scent of the forest gives way to the sharp, briny tang of salt. You can hear a new sound, the distant, rhythmic sigh of the sea. You emerge from the woods onto a cliff overlooking the fjord, the great artery of life that connects your world to the open ocean. And it is here that the true, wild bounty lies. The sea is far more generous than the forest. You clamber down a well-worn path to the rocky shoreline, where a small, sturdy boat, a fairing, is pulled up on the beach, pushing it into the frigid water. You hop in and take up the oars. The work is rhythmic, your muscles pulling in a familiar pattern as you row out into the deeper water of the fjord. Here, you unspool a long line made of twisted horsehair or seal gut. The hook is simple, carved from bone, or perhaps forged from a small piece of precious iron. The bait is a mussel you pulled from a rock and cracked open. You drop the line, feeling the weight bump along the unseen bottom far below. And you wait. This is the very essence of the Viking diet. Forget for a moment the bloodthirsty raids. For every Viking who ever lifted an axe in anger, there were countless more who spent their days just like this, sitting in a small boat, hoping for a fish. And the sea provided. It gave up enormous pale-fleshed cod, the true white gold of the north. It offered up shimmering schools of herring in such numbers that they seemed to turn the water itself to silver. A good catch of cod and herring was more than just a few meals. This was the foundation of your winter survival and your economy. Back on shore, these fish would be gutted and either hung on huge wooden racks to be dried by the ceaseless wind into hard, nutrition-packed boards of turfisk or stockfish, or they would be heavily salted in barrels. This preserved fish could last for years, fueling long voyages and serving as a major trading commodity. It was a mainstream historical fact of your life. You are powered by fish. Historians still argue whether this fishing was mostly a local affair for the dinner pot, or if large-scale, almost industrial, processing stations existed in your time, prefiguring the massive fish trade of the later Middle Ages. Looking out at the vast grey fjord, it feels like it could be both. Today, you are just fishing for yourself, but you know that at certain times of the year, this fjord would be crowded with boats, all working together to haul in the great schools of migratory fish. Your line suddenly jerks, a thrilling electric pulse traveling up into your hands. You pull, hand over hand, feeling the struggling weight at the other end. Finally, you haul it over the side, a fat, beautiful cod, its skin a perfect mottled camouflage. It is a good fish, enough for a fine meal tonight. You might also gather mussels from the rocks at low tide, or collect edible seaweed from the tidal pools. If a seal was clumsy enough to be caught on the rocks, its meat and fat would be a welcome prize. And on the luckiest of days, a whale might beach itself, a phenomenal gift of meat and oil that would be cause for a feast to rival any held in the longhouse. You row back to shore, your fine cod lying at the bottom of the boat. The sun is beginning to dip lower, and a chill is returning to the air. You have returned not with the predictable bounty of the field, but with a wild treasure, a direct gift from the sea. As you walk back towards the thin ribbon of smoke rising from your longhouse, wife, you feel the two parts of your world in balance, the sturdy, reliable farm, and the vast, unpredictable wild that surrounds it. Tonight, you will not eat porridge. Tonight, you will eat cod, perhaps pan-fried with a knob of butter and the last of the wild garlic. A simple meal, provided by the wild. Time passes as it always does, marked not by the pages of a calendar, but by the slow turning of the great wheel of seasons. The deep, insulating snows of winter have melted, and the farm has reawakened in a burst of vibrant green. The familiar cycle begins again. The scratching of the ard in the newly thawed soil, the planting of the precious barley, the birth of new lambs in the pasture. But this year, the coming of spring carries a different kind of energy. It's the call of the open water, a restless hum that seems to travel up the fjord from the distant sea. A longship is being made ready, and this time, you are going with it. You are not preparing for a feast now, or a simple day of foraging. You are preparing for the immense, hungry emptiness of the ocean. The foods you pack are not chosen for joy or celebration, but for pure, stubborn longevity. Your worldly possessions for the next few months will fit into a single sea chest, and a good portion of it is dedicated to sustenance. The greatest part of your rations is the fish you caught not just yesterday, But all winter long, you take down the stockfish, the turfisk, from the drying racks where it has hung for months, battered by the relentless wind, until it is as hard and unyielding as a piece of wood. It is feather-light and has almost no smell, but you know that within its rigid fibers is concentrated protein, the fuel you will need for rowing. Stacks. You pack these fish planks alongside bags of hard, twice-baked flatbreads, little more than flour and water cooked until they are stone-hard and devoid of any moisture that could welcome mold. They are so tough you could probably use one to patch a hole in the hull in an emergency, though you hope it never comes to that. Into a small wooden tub, you pack heavily salted butter, burying it under a top layer of brine. It will likely turn rancid on the journey, its flavor growing sharp and pungent, but its precious calories will remain. Remember the skyr and the sour whey from the dairy? Those, too, find their place. Some historians speculate that voyagers like you carried on soured milk products, the acidity providing some measure of preservation and a source of nutrients lacking in the dried rations. Perhaps you even have a cask of sour whey, its tartness a welcome, if slightly shocking, counterpoint to the endless salt. Managing fresh water is one of the journey's greatest challenges. Archaeologists still debate how vessels without large storage capacities managed on long-haul trips across the open ocean. Your water is stored in leather bags and wooden casks, but it will quickly grow foul. This is why you also have barrels of weak, sour ale. Its small alcohol content helps to kill germs, making it safer to drink than the stagnant water. Finally, the day comes. You push the magnificent longship from the shore, its dragon-headed prow tasting the salt spray. You find your place on the rowing bench, your sea chest beneath you, as the shoreline of home recedes, becoming a thin green line on the horizon. The reality of your new diet sets in. Life is now governed by the rhythm of the oar, the snap of the sail, and the emptiness of your stomach. There are no warm hearths here, no bubbling cauldrons of stew. A fire is a luxury and a danger, lit only on a special stone slab amidships, when the weather is calm. Enough. Your daily meal is a study in brutalist cuisine. You take a piece of the rock-hard stockfish, and you beat it. You hammer it with a rock or the hilt of your knife, breaking up the woody fibers until it becomes a fluffy, almost cotton-like material. You might chew this as is, letting your own saliva slowly rehydrate it, your jaws working tirelessly. Or you might steep it in a bucket of seawater to soften it before eating it with a smear of that tangy, rancid butter. The hard bread requires a similar commitment. You have to dunk it in water or ale until it's soft enough not to break a tooth. Its flavor a dull, dusty memory of grain. And that is your life for weeks on end. The same meal, day after day, a monotonous cycle of dried fish and hard bread, broken only by the taste of salt spray on your lips. But then, one day, the horizon changes. A new coastline appears. It is greener, softer than the harsh rocky shores of your home. You have arrived in Francia, or perhaps the coast of England. You steer the ship not towards an undefended beach for a raid, but into the crowded mouth of a river, towards a bustling market town. And here your entire world of taste is turned upside down. For the air itself smells different, thick with the aromas of wood smoke from 1,000 unfamiliar chimneys, roasting meat cooked with herbs you've never encountered, and the sweet, dizzying scent of baking unlike anything from your mother's hearth. You and your shipmates trade some of your cargo, fine northern furs, amber, perhaps even walrus ivory, and with the silver you receive, you venture into the market. It's an assault on the senses. A merchant offers you a taste of something he calls wine. It is pressed from grapes, he explains. You've only ever known the malty heartiness of ale and the honeyed power of mead. This liquid is different. It's smooth, slightly tannic, and carries the flavor of sunshine in a way that is utterly foreign and deeply sophisticated. It makes your finest ale taste like farmyard mud. At a food stall, you eat a savory pie, the crust flaky with lard, the filling rich with tender meat, seasoned not just with salt, but with something else, a sharp, almost spicy black powder, pepper, the vendor tells you, brought all the way from the east. It's a flavor explosion in your mouth, a warmth that blossoms at the back of your throat. To you, whose spice rack has always consisted of salt and maybe some wild garlic, this single seasoning is a revelation. This must be the taste of wealth itself. You trade a small piece of silver for a tiny pouch of these black peppercorns, a treasure more valuable than the silver itself. Another journey takes you south and east, through a dizzying network of rivers, until you reach the grandest city in the world, Miklagard, the great city, what they call Constantinople. Here, the food is from another reality entirely. You encounter flavors that your Scandinavian palate can barely process. You taste figs for the first time, their dense, sticky sweetness, a shocking indulgence. You eat dates and almonds and see vibrant oranges piled high. You are introduced to spices you have no names for. The earthy warmth of cumin, the floral notes of coriander, the woody aroma of cinnamon sticks. It is here that you understand that your diet of boiled cabbage and dried fish is not the diet of the world, but of a small, cold corner of it. These are the quirky tidbits of travel, the personal discoveries that will never be recorded in any saga, but will remain imprinted on your memory. Months later, you return home. The Dragon Pro once again kisses the familiar stones of your own fjord. The scent of pine and damp earth feels like a welcome embrace after the chaotic perfumes of foreign cities. The longhouse, which once felt small and dark, now feels safe and deeply comforting. In your sea chest, among your worn clothes, is your little pouch of peppercorns and perhaps a string of dried figs. They are your secrets, your trophies. That evening, a stew is bubbling in the old cauldron over the central fire. It's the familiar scaws, mutton, turnips, onions. It is the taste of home. But this time, you do something different. You take out your small knife and, with the reverence of a priest, you crush a single peppercorn and sprinkle its dust into the pot. When you taste it, the familiar stew is transformed. It is still the food of your home, of your land, but it now holds a tiny, ghostly echo of a wider, more flavorful world. You sit on the bench, a bowl of this new, magical stew in your hands. The warmth spreading through you, your gaze drifts to the fire, and you think of the hard, wooden fish that kept you alive on the sea, and the sweet, sticky fig that opened your eyes in a distant land. You are home, and you are content. What ancient Romans did for entertainment. The day's heat is beginning to soften. The sharp, white glare of midday has mellowed into a thick, golden honey that pours through the grand arches and narrow alleyways of Rome. For hours, the sun has been beating down on the marble and travertine, and now the city itself seems to be breathing that heat back out. You can feel it rising from the paving stones, through the worn leather of your sandals. The air is dense, carrying a uniquely Roman perfume. The dust of the streets, the sharp scent of crushed mint and fennel, from a passing food vendor's cart, the faint, ever-present trace of sewage from the Cloaca Maxima, and over it all, the sweet, heavy fragrance of jasmine climbing a sun-warmed wall. Most of the city's business is winding down. The clamor of the forum has faded to a murmur. The craftsmen are putting away their tools. But for you, the best part of the day is just beginning. There is a shift in the current of the crowd, a gentle but insistent pull towards a particular part of the Campus Martius. You join the flow of people, plebeians in their simple off-white tunics, wealthy equestrians with their fine gold rings, freedmen and foreign visitors, all drifting in the same direction, a human river seeking its estuary. So, today, a wealthy patron is sponsoring Ludi Scarnaci, stage plays, and admission is free for everyone, an act of public generosity that also happens to be fantastic for one's political career. Before you, it rises like a giant stone smile, a theatre. It's not a fully enclosed circle like the great amphitheatre, but a perfect semicircle, its tiered seats sweeping upwards, open to the sky. A massive linen awning, the vela, has been stretched over much of the seating area by a team of skilled sailors, providing blessed shade and casting a soft, diffused light over the stone. You present your small clay token, your tessera, at an entrance archway, and are guided up a steep set of stairs into the seating area, the cavea. Your seat is not down in the front with the senators, who get to lounge on their comfortable cushioned chairs in the orchestra, but high up, high enough to see the curve of the city's rooftops beyond the stage, high enough to feel the first hints of an evening breeze. The place is buzzing, a low hum of thousands of conversations blending into a single, massive sound. People are catching up with neighbors, sharing gossip, cracking nuts, and buying little honey cakes from vendors who patrol the aisles. It's less like a modern hushed theater and more like the cheap seats at a baseball game. Suddenly, a fine mist drifts over your section, carrying a delightful scent of saffron and rose. It's the sparsiones, a system of pipes and nozzles designed to spray scented water over the crowd, a welcome and rather luxurious form of ancient air conditioning. It does a reasonable job of masking the aroma of a few thousand hot, closely packed people. A thoughtful touch, you admit. Then a hush falls. A flute player walks to the edge of the stage and begins a simple, haunting melody. The play is about to begin. The first performance of the day is a comedy, a familiar favorite by Plautus. It has emerged from the tall, ornate stage building, the Scaenae Frons, which is painted to look like a bustling street with 2 or 3 houses. And here you meet the first rule of Roman theatre. You will never see the actors' true faces. They are all wearing masks, large terracotta masks with exaggerated expressions and wide open mouths that act as rudimentary megaphones. There's the young man, his mask a caricature of romantic anguish, clutching his heart because he's hopelessly in love with a girl he can't afford. Out of the next house comes a grumpy old man, his mask a permanent scowl of suspicion and greed. He's the girl's father, naturally, and finally, the star of the show arrives. The clever slave. His mask has a knowing, cockeyed grin, and he immediately begins talking directly to you, the audience, sharing his brilliant, slightly illegal plan to swindle the old man out of his money and unite the young lovers. It's a formula you've seen a dozen times, the ancient equivalent of a sitcom, complete with its predictable but beloved cast of characters, and it's an exclusively male cast. A mainstream historical fact of the Roman stage was that all roles, male and female, were played by men who would don different masks and costumes to portray different people. The clever slave's antics are brilliant. The dialogue is full of witty puns and slapstick humor that has the whole crowd roaring. You watch him talk his way out of a beating and convince a pompous soldier, his mask impossibly heroic and self-important, to loan him money. It's all very light and silly, and you laugh until your sides ache. But then the mood shifts, the comedy ends, the actors take their bows to thunderous applause, and after a short interlude, a different kind of performance begins. This is a mime. The name is misleading. It's not a silent act. In fact, it's very loud and very, very popular. The actors come out, and the first thing you notice is the shocking intimacy. They wear no masks. You can see their real faces, their sweat, their smirks, their leers. The plot is usually far more risky than the clever comedies, often a lurid tale of adultery and intrigue. A bored wife, a clumsy husband, and a handsome lover. There's a lot of physical comedy, choreographed fights, and dramatic fainting spells. It is, for all intents and purposes, the trashy reality television of its day. And here you see something truly unique to the mime. There is a woman on stage. Mime was one of the very few theatrical arts where female actors were permitted, and they often became huge celebrities in their own right. Bathe, the performance is bawdy and verges on the scandalous, and the crowd loves it. yelling encouragement and catcalling the villains. Historians still argue whether the crowd's legendary roadiness, the fabled throwing of fruit and insults, was a constant, everyday feature of the theatre, or if it was reserved for exceptionally bad performances, like a particularly brutal online review going viral in real time. From your vantage point, it seems lively, but mostly good-natured. It's all part of the fun. As the mime reaches its chaotic conclusion, the sun has finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky behind the stage in deepening shades of purple and orange. The plays are over. You stand up, your legs stiff from sitting on the hard stone bench for hours, and join the slow-moving tide of people making their way back down the staircases and out into the cooling twilight. Your mind is full of the day's entertainment, the jokes of the clever slave, the shocking finale of the mime. You feel connected to the hundreds of strangers around you, having shared in this communal experience of laughter and drama. The city is darker now, dotted with the flickering orange flames of oil lamps, and as you walk home, the rhythms of the plays and the faces of the actors, both real and masked, follow you through the quiet streets. You wake the next morning to a different kind of sound, not the gentle hum of a waking city, but a distant, rhythmic roar, a sound so vast and low you feel it in your chest before you can identify it with your ears. It is a day of ludi circenses, the circus games. All of Rome, it seems, is heading south, past the Palatine Hill, towards the great valley that holds the city's heart and its premier obsession, the Circus Maximus. There's no need to ask for directions. You are simply swept up in a human torrent, a river of anticipation flowing through the city streets. The crowd today feels different from the theatergoers of yesterday. More intense, more focused. You see groups of men walking together, their tunics dyed in specific, vibrant colors: fiery red, pristine white, rich green, and sea blue. They are fans of the chariot factions, the great racing stables that command a loyalty more ferocious than anything you can imagine. This isn't just about sporting preference, it's a matter of identity, a declaration of belonging that can split families and start riots. This deep-seated fanaticism for the factions is a core historical fact of Roman life, a force as potent then as any modern sports rivalry. As you draw closer, the sheer scale of the circus Maximus becomes overwhelming. It is not a building so much as a reshaped landscape, a vast, elongated U-shaped arena, its seating tiers climbing the slopes of the Palatine and Aventine hills, capable of holding, some say, over Ebite Wuzzers Ling people, a staggering portion of the city's population, all packed into one place. You feel impossibly small as you pass through one of the many arched entrances at its base. The spectacle is breathtaking. A long sandy track, the arena, stretches out before you, split down the middle by a decorative stone barrier, the spina. The spina is a marvel in itself, adorned with captured obelisks from Egypt, ornate statues of the gods, and at each end, the crucial turning posts, the metae. You also see the mechanisms for tracking the race: 7 large bronze dolphins and 7 stone eggs. At the end of each lap, 1 dolphin would be tipped and 1 egg removed, a clear and simple display for the roaring crowds. A clever, analog lap counter for the largest sporting venue in human history. Your seat, once again, is not among the powerful men and women seated in the lower tiers, but high up, offering a panoramic god's-eye view of the entire track. The air up here is thick with the smells of sun-baked dust, cheap wine, and roasted sausages from the arcades below. But beneath it all is another scent, animal and powerful, the smell of nervous horses. From your perch, you can see the carceres, the 12 arched starting gates at the flat end of the track. You know that behind those wooden gates, the charioteers are making their final preparations. These charioteers are superstars. Most are slaves, but they can earn fame and riches beyond the dreams of an ordinary Roman. You watch them, taut and focused, small figures in the distance. The best of them, a man like Gaius Appius Diocles, could become one of the wealthiest men in the empire, his winnings amounting to a fortune, large enough to feed the entire city of Rome for a year. You notice how each driver has carefully wrapped the leather reins around his waist. It gives them better leverage to control 4 straining horses with their body weight. But it's also a death trap. If the chariot crashes, they can be dragged along the track. That is why every charioteer carries a sharp, curved knife, the forks, tucked into his belt, a last-ditch tool to cut himself free before being trampled by other teams. A rather grim piece of athletic equipment, and a sobering reminder of the stakes. The day begins with the Pompa Circenses, a grand opening ceremony. A procession enters the track, led by the magistrate sponsoring the games, riding in a chariot and dressed like a triumphant general. He's followed by musicians, priests carrying incense and images of the gods, and finally, the stars of the show, the charioteers themselves, leading their magnificent, high-strung horses. The crowd roars its approval, each faction, the reds, the whites, the blues, the greens, screaming for their heroes. You can feel the tribal energy in the air, a thrilling, almost dangerous passion. Some people around you are making bets, shouting odds to an informal bookie in the row below. Others clutch lead amulets they bought outside, small curse tablets inscribed with pleas to the gods of the underworld. To hobble a rival team's horses or shatter their charioteers' concentration. Historians still debate just how widespread this magical cheating was. Was it a fringe practice for the truly desperate fan, or did half the stadium have a cursed tablet tucked in their toga? Then silence falls. The magistrate stands in his box and drops a white cloth, the mappa, a single sharp blast from a trumpet, and the gates of the carceres spring open. 12 chariots burst onto the track. The sound is not a sharp crack, but a low, earth-shaking rumble that builds and builds. It's the sound of Sushabat hooves digging into the sand, of wooden wheels straining, of leather and bronze creaking under immense pressure. At first, it's a jumbled mass of color and motion, a thundering herd. But as they approach the first turn, strategies emerge. The racers jostle for the inside lane, the shortest path around the spina. This is where the most danger lies. Taking the turn too tight could cause a wheel to clip the meta, sending the chariot flipping over in a spectacular, deadly crash, what the Romans grimly called a naufragium, a shipwreck. The crowd rises to its feet as a single entity. The next 10 minutes are a blur of color and noise. The chariots string out along the track, a kaleidoscope of faction colors against the pale sand. You lose track of individual teams, mesmerized by the overall spectacle. With each lap, a dolphin is tipped, an egg removed. The crowd's roar is a constant wave, rising in pitch as the teams thunder past your section of the stadium. People are yelling, pleading, waving pieces of cloth in their faction's color. They are not merely watching, they are participating, willing their team to victory through sheer force of collective desire. There is little sarcasm in the stands today, just pure, unadulterated passion that would make a modern football hooligan look like a reserved librarian. On the final lap, the race has come down to 2 teams, a blue and a green. They are neck and neck down the final straightaway. The entire circus is screaming, a single deafening sound. Everyone is leaning forward, as if their collective momentum can push their favorite over the finish line. The blue driver whips his horses one last time, gaining a sliver of an advantage. He crosses the finish line not even a half length ahead. An explosion of noise erupts from half the stadium. The blue fans are delirious, hugging, cheering, some even weeping with joy. On the other side, the green supporters fall silent, a vast, crushing weight of disappointment settling over them. The victorious driver takes a slow victory lap, basking in the adoration of his fans. He is awarded a victor's palm frond and a heavy purse of gold coins. You watch him, this slave who is, for a moment, a god. You feel drained, wrung out by the sheer emotional intensity of it all. As the crowd slowly, reluctantly begins to file out, you remain in your seat for a moment, listening to the echoing quiet of the vast, empty stadium. It's a space that held the hopes and dreams and furious passions of Ebite Wussers, Lingsuls, just minutes ago. Now, all that remains is the scored, sandy track and the scent of dust on the evening air. If the theater was for the heart and the circus for the soul, the amphitheater is for the gut. A different kind of anticipation pulls you from your small apartment. The next day, it's not the cheerful buzz of playgoers or the tribal passion of the chariot fans. It is a darker, deeper thrum, a city-wide hunger for something more visceral. You join the familiar crowds once again, but today the current flows towards the valley between the Esquilin and Kalian hills, towards a structure so vast, so iconic, that it needs no formal name. Everyone just calls it the Colosseum. From a distance, it looks like a mountain of stone, a perfect, man-made crater of arches and columns. As you get closer, you see it's a living entity. Its 80 ground-level arches swallowing streams of people, digesting them into its cavernous interior. Your ticket, your little pottery shard, directs you to one of the numbered gates. Inside, you are not met with chaos, but with an astonishing feat of Roman engineering. You are funneled into a vomitorium, a sloping, barrel-vaulted corridor designed to disgorge thousands of people into the seating tiers, quickly and efficiently. It's a slightly unfortunate name for a system so brilliant, but you have to admit, it gets the job done. You emerge high up in the gods, the nosebleed seats at the very top of the amphitheater, under the wooden portico reserved for the poor, the women, and those of little social standing. The view is vertiginous, terrifying, and absolutely spectacular. The oval of the arena floor far below looks deceptively small. It is covered in fresh, clean sand, a pale stage waiting for its actors. You can see the senators in their privileged seats down by the barrier, the wealthy knights above them, the respectable middle classes above them, all arranged in perfect, stratified layers. It is the entire social pyramid of Rome, conveniently organized for a day of state-sponsored violence. The day begins not with men, but with beasts. This is the Venatio, the hunt. A trumpet sounds, and you watch, amazed, as a section of the sand-covered floor silently opens. A lush green tree, its leaves shimmering, rises majestically from the unseen depths below. Moments later, from another hidden trapdoor, a ramp ascends, and out into the sunlight trots a herd of gazelles, looking nervous and out of place. This is the magic of the Hypogeum, the elaborate two-story network of tunnels, cages, and elevators directly beneath the arena floor. It is a masterpiece of stagecraft, capable of delivering exotic animals, scenery, and gladiators to any part of the arena in a dramatic surprise. Before the gazelles can even get their bearings, another lift delivers the hunters, men with bows and spears, skilled bestiarii. What follows is not a fair chase, but a performance of skill and slaughter. The crowd watches with keen interest, applauding a particularly well-aimed arrow or a daring move. Then comes another scene. A pack of growling hyenas is released to face a cornered bear. Ostriches, rhinos, crocodiles, animals you have only ever heard of in stories, creatures from the farthest, wildest edges of the map, are brought here to die for your entertainment. The logistics are mind-boggling, a testament to the immense power and reach of the empire, which could casually pluck these creatures from their native lands in Africa and Asia, and transport them here, to this stone circle in the heart of Italy. This showcasing of exotic, imported fauna was a key part of the spectacle. As the sun climbs towards noon, the morning hunts conclude. The sand, no longer pristine, is raked over by arena attendants. This is the midday lull, a time when many of the wealthier patrons might leave for lunch. For those who remain, a grimmer form of entertainment is provided, the damnatio ad bestias, the public executions. You watch as condemned criminals, sometimes dressed in mythological costumes for a bit of extra theatrical flair, are brought into the arena. It is brutal, grim, and efficient. It is the state's most potent reminder of the consequences of breaking Roman law. To you, it feels like a very strange choice for lunchtime viewing, but the crowd seems to accept it as a normal part of the day's program. Just a bit of judicial housekeeping before the main event. Finally, the afternoon arrives, and with it, the moment everyone has been waiting for, the gladiators. A grand procession, the pompa, enters the arena, led by musicians. The gladiators march in, decked out in shimmering, ornate armor that will be swapped for practical combat gear later. They are mostly slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals, but there are some free men among them who have chosen this life, chasing glory and prize. Money. They are the biggest celebrities in Rome, their images scrawled on walls as graffiti, their names known by everyone. The fights are not a chaotic, free-for-all brawl. They are carefully managed duels between specific, balanced types. You might see the classic matchup of the retiarius, the net man, armed only with a trident, a dagger, and a net, against the heavily armored secutor, whose helmet is a smooth, fish-like shape with only 2 tiny eye holes, designed to avoid being snagged by the net. It's a contest of speed versus power, agility versus defense. You watch the retiarius dance around the arena, flicking his net, trying to entangle his slower opponent, while the secutor stalks him patiently, waiting for one false move. This precise system of pairing differently equipped fighters is a mainstream historical fact, turning mortal combat into a complex tactical science. Another fight pits a Thraex, with his small, square shield and curved sword, against a Hoplomachus, armed like a Greek soldier with a spear and round shield. Each clash of their weapons rings through the huge amphitheater. You see not just brute force, but incredible skill, balance, and stamina. This is their profession, and they are masters of their lethal craft. For all the bloodshed, there is a quirky, almost obsessive level of fandom around the minutiae of their careers. You could probably get into a heated argument with your neighbor about whether a particular gladiator's footwork has been off since his last match in Pompeii. When a gladiator is defeated, falling to the sand wounded but not yet dead, the climax arrives. The fight stops. The victorious gladiator looks to the editor of the games, often the emperor himself, for the final decision. The fallen warrior might raise a single finger, a plea for mercy. The crowd then makes its voice heard, screaming and waving. It is this moment, the rendering of a verdict on a man's life, that is the core of the experience. Historians still argue whether we thumbs down meant death and we thumbs up meant life, or if the gesture was different entirely, perhaps a thumb to the throat for death and a hidden thumb for a pardon. You watch as the crowd, seemingly satisfied with the defeated man's bravery, Pike gives the sign for him to be spared. He is led from the arena to be patched up and live to fight another day. Not every fight ends in death. In fact, these skilled warriors were incredibly valuable assets to their trainers, and killing them off needlessly was simply bad for business. On the rarest of occasions, the amphitheater could be transformed into something even more astounding. In the decades before the permanent hypogeum was built, this entire arena could be flooded with water, using a complex system of aqueducts and sluices, turning it into a vast lake for a naumachia, a staged mock naval battle, with real warships and hundreds of condemned men fighting to the death. You haven't seen one, but the stories are legendary, the ultimate display of Roman engineering and spectacle. As the final match concludes and the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the bloody sand, you file out with the exhausted crowd. The air outside the Colosseum feels thin and cool. You are drained, not by the passionate cheering of the circus, but by the primal intensity of what you've just witnessed. You saw life and death offered up as a form of entertainment, and you found yourself screaming for one outcome over another, along with 100,000 other voices. It's a strange, unsettling feeling, a powerful connection to the raw, beating heart of Roman life. After the visceral intensity of the Colosseum, you find yourself yearning not for more grand spectacles, but for quiet and calm. The relentless public entertainment of Rome, the plays, the races, the games, is only one facet of life. Today, you decide to partake in a more personal and soothing form of recreation. You set out not for a grand stadium, but for a different kind of palace, the public baths. As you walk, you notice that nearly every neighborhood seems to have its own bathhouse, from small, private establishments to the colossal imperial thermae. You decide to visit one of the larger ones, a sprawling complex that is less a simple bath and more a combination of a community center, health spa, and social club. The entrance fee is a pittance, the smallest coin in your pouch. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact of Roman urban life. The baths were designed to be accessible to almost everyone, a truly democratic institution where a senator might find himself soaking in the same pool as a shopkeeper. You enter a large open-air courtyard, the palaestra, a space for exercise and light activity. The sun is warm but not scorching. All around you, people are preparing for their bath. You see men stripped down, their bodies glistening with oil, engaged in a game of trigon, a fast-paced three-way ball game that requires quick reflexes. Others are lifting weights, practicing wrestling moves, or simply strolling and chatting with friends. You can hear the slap of the ball, the grunts of exertion, and the constant murmur of easy conversation. This isn't the anxious hum of a pre-game crowd, but the relaxed buzz of a community at ease. You purchase a small clay bottle of olive oil and a strigil, a curved metal scraper, from a vendor. You find a spot, undress, and rub the oil all over your skin. This is the Roman version of soap. There's no lather, just the slow, meditative process of coating your body in a slick, fragrant film. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen some of the ladies might have used? This oil and scraper system is far more pleasant, thankfully. Once you've worked up a light sweat from a brisk walk around the palaestra, you begin the bathing ritual itself. You enter the building, and the first room you come to is the tepidarium, the warm room. The warmth here is it's a gentle, pleasant heat that radiates from the floors and walls, a product of the ingenious underfloor heating system called the hypocaust. You can feel the warmth through your bare feet as you walk across the mosaic floors. The air is humid and steamy, a perfect environment to begin relaxing your muscles and opening your pores. People lounge on marble benches, gossiping, making business deals, or simply resting in the quiet warmth. From the tepidarium, you move into the caldarium, the hot room. The heat in here is a serious, wet blanket. The air is thick with steam, and you can see droplets of condensation clinging to the vaulted ceiling. In the center of the room is a large plunge pool of hot water. Sinking into it is a full-body sigh. You can feel the day's tensions, the lingering echoes of the roaring circus, and the grim scenes of the arena begin to dissolve. After soaking for a while, it's time to get clean. This is where the strigil comes in. You scrape off the mixture of oil, sweat, and dirt from your skin. It's a slightly strange, but incredibly effective way to exfoliate. Often, if you were wealthy, you'd have an enslaved person to do this for you. But today you do it yourself, the curved blades scraping away the grime in long, satisfying ribbons. It's an odd bit of personal hygiene that is deeply Roman. This ritual of scraping yourself clean, feeling thoroughly steamed and scraped. You move to the final stage of the bathing process, a bracing plunge into the frigidarium, the cold room. The shock of the cold water is electric. Your skin tingles, your senses snap back into sharp focus, and you feel utterly revitalized. After toweling off, you feel reborn, clean, relaxed, and peaceful. But the experience is not over. The baths were about more than just bathing. You wander through the complex and find libraries, where men sit quietly reading scrolls. There are lecture halls, where poets and philosophers might be giving a reading. There are gardens with shaded porticos, perfect for a quiet stroll, and there are even snack bars selling sausages, fruits, and wine. The social side of bathing was as important as the hygienic one. Historians still argue whether the largest baths functioned as loud, chaotic party centers, or as serene places of intellectual and social exchange. The truth, you suspect, is that it was a mix of both, a place where you could find whatever form of relaxation you sought. As evening approaches, you leave the baths, feeling clean and tranquil. Your plans for the rest of the night are quiet and private. A friend has invited you to a small dinner party, a cena. You arrive at his domus, a peaceful home built around a central courtyard. The atrium. There is no roar of the crowd here, just the gentle splashing of a fountain and the soft glow of oil lamps. You are shown to the dining room, the triclinium, where you and the other guests recline on 3 large couches, arranged around a central table. This is how you eat at a formal meal, lying on your side, propped up on your left elbow. The food is simple but delicious. Some lentils, grilled fish with herbs, fresh bread, and good wine mixed with water. The conversation is gentle, interspersed with laughter. There's no pressure to cheer or to pass judgment on anyone. It is a world away from the grand public spectacles. After the meal, your host brings out a board game. Perhaps it's La Tranquil, the game of soldiers, a complex game of strategy that's a bit like chess. Or maybe it's Duodecim Scripta, a game of 12 lines, which is closer to backgammon and involves both luck and skill. Dot as you roll dice and move your pieces along the board. Archaeological finds all over the empire, from military camps to private homes, attest to the absolute ubiquity of board games. It was a fringe activity in the sense that it left little mark on the grand histories, but it was a central part of everyday leisure for millions. You settle in, your mind focused on the carved wooden pieces, the friendly banter with your opponents, the soft lamplight flickering on the board. You drink your watered wine and enjoy the simple pleasure of good company. Outside, the great city of Rome, a metropolis obsessed with spectacle and adrenaline, hums on. But here, in this quiet room, you have found a different kind of entertainment. It is not the thrill of the chariot race or the grim fascination of the gladiator, but the simple, profound joy of a clean body, a good meal, and a shared game between friends. And as you finally make your way home through the dark and sleeping city, you realize this quiet contentment is just as Roman as the roaring of the crowd, the rise and fall of the Mayan civilization. Imagine the air. It's not thin and sharp, but thick, a heavy, green-tinted blanket you feel on your skin. You can taste it, a complex cocktail of damp earth, sweet, decaying blossoms, and the humid breath of a million living leaves. Above you, a near-unbroken canopy creates a perpetual twilight, the distant sun shattering into 1,000 shimmering shards of light that dapple the forest floor. The soundtrack to your life is a constant, living hum. The percussive buzz of insects, the sudden rattling cry of an unfamiliar bird, and in the distance, the otherworldly, guttural roar of howler monkeys, a sound that feels older than the trees themselves. For as long as anyone can remember, your family group has moved through this world like a slow, patient river. You follow the game, you learn the secret locations of fruit-bearing trees, you know which roots are safe to eat, and which will bring sickness. You sleep in temporary shelters, woven from branches and broad leaves, homes that are built to be abandoned. Your entire world is portable, carried in woven baskets on your backs or in the collective memory of your elders. The rhythm of your existence is governed by the immediate, by the daily search for sustenance. But something is changing. It isn't a sudden event, but a slow, almost imperceptible shift, a new harmony beginning to emerge from the jungle's song. It centers around a particular plant, not the tallest tree or the most vibrant flower, but a humble, grassy weed. The elders have known about it for generations. how its tiny, nut-like seeds could be gathered and eaten. But patient revealed a secret. If you select the best seeds, the ones from the plants that grow tallest and yield the most, and you plant them in a clearing, they will grow again, but better. This is the very dawn of maize. It is the domesticated form of a wild grass called teosinte, a mainstream historical fact that represents one of the most significant agricultural achievements in human history. This plant begins to exert a strange gravity. Unlike the wild tubers you dig up or the animals you hunt, it asks you to stay. It requires a commitment. It needs you to clear the land, to protect its tender shoots from pests, to weed its patch of soil. And so, you make a choice that will alter the course of destiny in this part of the world. Your family, along with a few others, decides to stop walking. You find a place, a small rise of land near a cenote, a deep, natural well where the limestone bedrock has collapsed to expose the cool, clear groundwater beneath. It is a sacred place, a literal window into the underworld, and a reliable source of fresh water. Here you begin to build your new life. The first great task is to make room. This involves the cycle of milpa, or slash-and-burn agriculture. You select a patch of forest. The men, with their stone axes, attack the trees. It's slow, arduous work, the rhythmic thud of stone on wood echoing through the jungle. The felling of a great ceiba tree feels like a momentous event, a true battle with a giant. After the trees are felled and have been left to dry in the punishing sun, you set the clearing on fire. The smoke is thick and acrid, blotting out the sky for days. It drives the animals away and temporarily quiets the insects. But when the smoke clears, you are left with something new, a gray, ash-covered canvas, the soil temporarily supercharged with nutrients. And in this scorched earth, you plant your seeds. Using a simple pointed stick, a dibber, you press a few precious kernels of maize into the ground. Alongside them, you plant beans that will climb the sturdy corn stalks, and squash, whose broad leaves will shade the soil, keeping it moist and preventing weeds. These are the three sisters, a perfect symbiotic family of plants that will become the holy trinity of your diet. While you wait for the crops to grow, you build a more permanent home, not the flimsy shelters of your nomadic past, but a real house. You drive wooden posts into the earth, weave a lattice of vines and flexible branches between them. This is the wattle. Then you mix mud with dried grass and plaster it over the frame. The daub, the roof, is a thick, expertly layered thatch of palm fronds, so tightly woven it can repel the heaviest tropical downpour. The finished house, an oval hut with a single doorway, has no granite countertops or walk-in closets, but the airflow is excellent, and it provides a profound sense of security. Soon, a small village sprouts from the jungle floor, a cluster of a dozen or so of these huts, arranged around a central open space that serves as the heart of your community. Archaeologists and paleoethnobotanists still argue whether the shift to full-time farming was a sudden revolution that happened in a generation or two, or a slow, centuries-long transition where people supplemented their traditional foraging with part-time gardening. For you living it, it feels like both. It is slow, but it is revolutionary. You still venture into the forest to hunt and forage, but you always return to your house, to your field, to your village. Your diet changes. The central sound of the village is now the rhythmic, scraping sound of the mano and metate, a smooth, handheld stone being ground against a larger, trough-shaped one. Women spend hours kneeling at these grinding stones, transforming the hard, dry kernels of maize into a fine flour, or masa, mixed with water and cooked over the fire. This becomes a thick, nourishing porridge, the ancient ancestor of grits or polenta. This is your daily bread, the food that fuels everything. The sheer amount of labor involved, the grinding, the cooking, the constant tending of the fields, means you aren't exactly living a life of leisure. Farming was a fascinating new invention that mainly involved a lot more work for everyone. New technologies emerge from necessity. You begin to shape the local clay into crude vessels, At first, they are simple, lumpy pots, but over time, the skill develops. You create jars for storing water and, more importantly, for storing surplus grain, and you make cooking pots which allow for soups and stews. This simple technology of pottery means you finally have something to hold leftovers in that isn't a leaf. Interestingly, some of the very earliest pottery here has a distinctive cone-shaped bottom, a quirky and brilliant design, perfectly suited not for a flat table, but for being set securely into the soft earth floor of your hut. You sit in the doorway of your new home as evening falls. The familiar sounds of the jungle press in, but they are joined now by new sounds. The laughter of children playing in the central plaza, the murmur of your neighbors' conversations, the gentle scraping of the grinding stone. A fire crackles nearby. The smell of cooking maize fills the air. This small patch of earth is yours. It is home, and from these humble, quiet beginnings, from these whispers in the jungle, a civilization is drawing its first breath. Iko? Generations come and go, like the turning of the seasons in your milpa field. The tiny settlement by the Sinyote, once just a handful of huts, has grown. What was a village has become a town. What was a town is becoming something else entirely, something your ancestors could not have imagined. You now live within a recognizable city. The heart of this city is no longer a simple open space, but a grand, limestone-paved plaza. And dominating this plaza, casting long, sharp shadows in the afternoon sun, are structures of astonishing ambition. The pyramids. You stand at the edge of the North Acropolis of a city like Tikal. Before you, a temple pyramid soars towards the heavens, its stone faces so steep they seem to claw at the sky. A monumental staircase, a stairway for giants, climbs its face, leading to a small building at its very summit. This is not just a building, it is an artificial mountain, a connection point between the three cosmic realms. The underworld below, this middle world where you stand, and the celestial realm of the gods above. This city is not merely a collection of homes, it is a living cosmogram, its very layout a map of the sacred universe. You are here today for a ceremony. The city's ruler, the Ajah, is going to dedicate a new monument. He is not just a king or a chieftain in the way your great-great-grandfather might have understood it. He is a divine lord, a Kuhul Ajah. He is believed to be the embodiment of cosmic power on earth, the conduit through whom the energy of the gods flows into the human world. He is responsible for the rain, for the success of the crops, for victory in battle. His life is an endless sequence of complex, draining rituals performed for the good of his people. The plaza is packed with people. The air is electric, thick with the scent of burning copal incense, a sacred resin whose fragrant white smoke is believed to carry prayers up to the gods. You can hear the low, rhythmic pounding of drums and the high, piercing notes of gourd rattles and clay ocarinas. It's a sound designed to alter consciousness, to open a doorway between the mundane and the divine. You crane your neck, looking up at the summit of the pyramid. The Ajah appears at the top of the stairs, a dazzling figure against the deep blue sky. He is not dressed like an ordinary man. He wears a towering headdress of brilliant green quetzal feathers, a symbol of royalty so precious that the bird it comes from was considered sacred. His body is adorned with intricate jade jewelry, heavy ear spools, a wide beaded collar, and a massive pectoral ornament that gleams like water in the sun. The Bem jade was not merely beautiful, it was the ultimate sacred substance, its green color symbolizing maize, water, and life itself. The ruler is literally wearing the symbols of fertility and sustenance. This is a mainstream historical fact of Maya kingship. The ruler's power was intrinsically linked to his ability to mediate with the gods of agriculture and ensure the community's survival. He is not alone. Priests, their bodies painted and their faces obscured by ornate masks, surround him. They hold ceremonial objects, eccentric flints chipped into impossibly complex, almost psychedelic shapes, and stingray spines instruments of holy pain. You watch as the ruler begins a slow, deliberate ritual dance. His movements are precise, ancient, telling a story from the epic of creation. He is no longer just a man, he is a god on a stage. The culmination of the ritual is a profound act of personal sacrifice. A priest hands the Ajor a stingray spine or a sharpened piece of obsidian. Before the eyes of the gods and his assembled people, he pierces his own body, perhaps his tongue, his ears, or another part. He draws a cord of bark paper through the wound, soaking it in his royal, sacred blood. This act of bloodletting is not about punishment or self-mortification in the way you might think. It is a sacred duty. The blood of the king is believed to be the most potent offering. Relaxation, a way to nourish the gods and maintain the cosmic balance. It's a transaction, the Guan. The gods gave their blood to create humanity, and now the ruler gives his blood back to them to keep the world running. A little light blood work to ensure the sun rises tomorrow. So to speak, this blood-soaked paper is then burned in a ceremonial vessel, and the smoke becomes a portal. In the swirling, pungent smoke, nourished by the offering, the devout might see visions, a glimpse of an ancestor, or the great vision serpent through whose mouth a god might manifest. While modern sensibilities might find this practice shocking, for you, it is a powerful and necessary act of faith. This sacred political theater is the central pillar of urban life in the classic period. From Tikal to Calakmul, Palenque to Copan, these city-states dotted the landscape of the Maya lowlands. They were not, however, part of a single, unified empire. A misunderstanding many people still have. Instead, they were a constellation of competing kingdoms, bound together by a shared culture and religion, but often engaged in bitter rivalry. These rivalries could lead to outright warfare, not necessarily for territorial conquest in the modern sense, but for the capture of noble rivals who would then be brought back to the victor's city for a highly public and ritualized humiliation and sacrifice. It's like a particularly intense game of capture the flag, if the flag was your enemy's king. Historians and archaeologists still argue intensely about the true nature of Maya warfare. Was it mostly a small-scale, ritual affair, focused on capturing high-status individuals, or were there massive campaigns involving thousands of soldiers that resulted in total destruction of enemy cities? Evidence points to both happening at different times and places, but you can see the results of these conflicts recorded in stone. After the ceremony, you walk to the base of a newly dedicated stela, a tall, flat stone slab erected in the plaza. Its entire surface is covered in intricate carvings. You see a portrait of your ruler standing triumphantly over a bound captive, and surrounding the image is a complex grid of glyphs. The beautiful, intricate Maya script. You yourself cannot read it, as literacy was the domain of a highly trained scribal elite, but you know that it tells the story of your king's victory, the date it happened, fixed precisely within the vast cosmic calendar, and the names of his ancestors. It is both political propaganda and a sacred historical document, a proclamation frozen in stone. These stelae are the time capsules that allow us, centuries later, to piece together the history of these divine kings, their wars, their alliances, and their lineage. Quirky personal details might also be recorded. At hand, one famous carving from the city of Yaxchilan depicts a royal lady named Lady Suk in the throes of a bloodletting-induced vision. It's a remarkably intimate and spiritually potent image to make so public and permanent. As the sun sets, the plaza slowly empties. The fires die down, and a hush falls over the stone city. The pyramid now stands as a dark silhouette against a sky brilliant with stars. You look up at that mountain of stone, a monument to the power of a single man to commune with the gods, and you feel both small and a part of something eternal. The king sleeps, the city rests, but the cosmic engine he helps to maintain churns ever onward. Life beneath the gaze of the pyramids has its own quiet, powerful rhythms, far removed from the high drama of royal bloodletting. The city might be the domain of the Kuhul Ajar, but the universe it represents is something every single person participates in. From the highest priest to the humblest farmer, your world is woven together by an unseen tapestry of ritual, knowledge, and social obligation that is as solid and structured as a limestone temple. You awaken in your family's compound, a collection of thatched roof houses, similar to the ones your distant ancestors built, clustered around a shared. This is the basic building block of Maya society. While the divine king may live in a grand stone palace in the city's heart, you and your kin live here, on the edges of the urban core, in a space that blends seamlessly into the agricultural landscape that supports it. Your first thoughts of the day are practical. You are a farmer. The maize that feeds the city, that feeds the king himself, grows because of the labor of your hands. You take up your fire-hardened digging stick and head out to the fields. These aren't vast, open prairies, but a complex mosaic of gardens, orchards, and milpa plots carved into the jungle. It is an incredibly sophisticated form of agroforestry. Alongside the holy trinity of maize, beans, and squash, you tend to a wide variety of other plants. You might check on your chili pepper plants, your cacao trees, whose beans are precious and used to make a bitter, frothy drink reserved for the elite, and your manioc, a root crop that provides a crucial caloric safety net. This diversity is the secret to your people's resilience in this challenging environment. It's a mainstream historical fact that this complex, multi-crop system, which recent LiDAR scans have revealed, was far more extensive and engineered than previously imagined, sustained large urban populations for centuries. But your farming is not purely a practical science. It is a sacred act. Every step, from planting to harvest, is governed by the intricate Maya calendar. And you don't have just one calendar, because that would be far too simple. You live your life according to the interplay of at least two main cycles. The first is the Harb, a Sambide Loswude solar calendar, much like our own, which governs the seasons of agriculture. The second is the Tzolk'in, a Arbak Likas Day sacred calendar, a mysterious cycle whose origin is still debated by scholars. Was it based on the 9-month cycle of human gestation, or the agricultural cycles of the highlands? Nobody knows for sure, but its importance is absolute. Each day has a unique name, a combination of a number from 1 to 13 and one of 20 named days. This calendar round date, the meshing of the Harb and the Tzolk'in, repeats every Wu Sha'ar years. This Wu Sha'ar year cycle is a major marker of time, and the completion of a cycle was a time for great ceremonies and renewal. A person's birth date in the Tzolk'in was believed to determine their character and their destiny. Like a deeply complex, the priests, with their sacred screenfold books, are the masters of this system, able to look forward and backward in time, to select the most auspicious days for war, for marriage, and for planting your corn. You would never dream of planting on a day deemed unlucky by the sacred calendar. To do so would be to court disaster. This cosmic timekeeping is part of a larger body of knowledge held by the scribes and priests. These are the intellectuals of your society, the keepers of the glyphs. In a quiet workshop, you might see a scribe at his task. He is not carving a massive stela, but painting with a fine brush onto a long strip of bark dot paper that has been coated with a layer of white plaster. He paints the complex, beautiful glyphs with an artist's hand. He is recording not just history but astronomical data, prophecies, and religious doctrine. These screenfold books, of which only 4 have miraculously survived into the modern era, are our only direct window into the sheer intellectual depth of Maya culture. We know from them that they were gifted astronomers who could track the cycles of Venus and predict solar and lunar eclipses with astonishing accuracy. Imagine being able to predict something as terrifying as the sun suddenly vanishing from the sky. That is a truly powerful form of knowledge, but society is more than farmers and priests. There is a whole class of skilled artisans. In another part of the city, you can hear the sharp clink of obsidian being worked. A master craftsman is creating one of those wonderfully bizarre, eccentric flints you saw at the ceremony, his skill in pressure flaking so advanced. It seems like magic. Elsewhere, a potter is painting an elaborate scene on a cylindrical vase. These aren't just pretty decorations. Often, they depict mythological scenes or courtly life, with glyphic text running around the rim telling you who the vase was made. For and what it was used for, often for drinking that prized cacao beverage. These vases are like little stone snapshots, providing a quirky, behind-the-scenes look at the life of the Maya elite, sometimes depicting them gossiping or lounging in ways that feel very human and unstuffy. This society, of course, has its own rules. Justice is swift. If there is a dispute over land or an accusation of theft, you go before a local nobleman who listens to both sides and delivers a judgment. There's no lengthy appeal process. For serious crimes, the punishment could be severe, even including being enslaved to the family you wronged. It is a world where community balance is paramount, and this balance extends to the world of trade. While there is no money in the modern sense, a vibrant economy thrives. In the central market, you see goods from all over the Maya world and beyond. You might trade a surplus of your beans for salt from the coastal regions, razor-sharp obsidian blades from the volcanic highlands, or beautifully woven textiles from a neighboring city. High-value items like jade beads, cacao beans, or brilliantly colored spondylus shells act as a kind of currency for larger transactions. You can't go to a convenience store for a bar of chocolate, but you could buy a fine new pot with a handful of cocoa beans. At the end of a long day, you return to your family compound. The smell of wood smoke and cooking tortillas hangs in the air. The chores are done, the day's obligations met. You gather with your family in the patio, listening to an elder tell a story from the Popol Vuh, the great epic of the hero twins and their battles with the lords of the underworld. It is a story you have heard 100 times, but it is your story. It explains how the world came to be and your place in it. Life here is hard work, governed by tradition and the will of the gods, but it is a stable, well-ordered universe. From your humble patio, you can hear the distant sounds of the city's heart. But here, in the quiet embrace of your family, is the true beating center of your Maya world. The story you hear from the elders in the quiet of the evening begins to change. The old tales from the Popol Vuh of creation and heroic deeds are still told, but now new, uncertain notes have crept into the narrative. There is talk of harvests that are not as bountiful as they once were, of the rainy season, starting late and ending early. In the midday heat, you can see it for yourself. The stalks of maize in your milpa plot seem thinner this year, the cobs smaller. The familiar paths to the forest streams seem longer, the water level lower than you remember. A subtle, creeping anxiety has begun to thread its way through the well-ordered fabric of your life. The rituals in the Grand Plaza become more frequent, more fervent. The air is almost perpetually thick with the scent of burning copal. The Ajah and his priests perform the ancient ceremonies with a desperate intensity. You see the divine king on the summit of the Great Pyramid, his magnificent Quetzal headdress seeming to wilt slightly in the unrelenting sun. He bleeds for his people, offering his sacred blood to the gods with a fierce devotion. But the skies remain stubbornly clear. The rain clouds, it seems, have not received the message. You begin to see a quiet questioning in the eyes of your neighbors. The king's authority, his very divinity, is built upon the promise that he can maintain the cosmic balance. But the cosmic balance is clearly out of alignment, with the local food supplies dwindling, tensions between the city-states, escalate beyond the ritualistic capture of nobles. Now, when warriors march, it is with a different kind of hunger. They fight not just for honor and captives, but for control of the best agricultural land, the few rivers that still flow, and vital trade routes. Warfare, once a controlled part of the political theater, has become a destructive endemic plague. A quirky, if tragic, byproduct of this stress can be seen in the smaller, outlying settlements. You might see a local lord hastily erecting a monument that is a crude, clumsy imitation of the grand stele in the capital, a desperate attempt to project a power that is rapidly slipping through everyone's fingers. Then, the ultimate sign of failure occurs. One day, you walk past the plaza where a great stela has been planned, but the stonemasons are gone. Their tools lie where they were dropped. The carving is unfinished. For centuries, the most important duty of the divine kings was to record their deeds in stone, to mark the passage of time according to the sacred calendar. And now, the practice is simply stopping. The last date carved on the last monument in your city will one day become a famous archaeological mystery, a final, silent timestamp on the end of an era. The cessation of monument construction is a stark, mainstream historical fact, signaling the collapse of the elite power structure that commissioned it. A decision, once unthinkable, becomes the only logical choice. Your family gathers not for a ceremony, but for a departure. You pack what you can carry, some precious seed corn for a new life, a few clay pots, the family's grinding stone, far too heavy, but impossible to leave behind. You don't set fire to your home. There is no grand, dramatic exit. You just leave. You join a quiet, steady stream of families walking away from the stone heart of the city, melting back into the jungle from which your ancestors first emerged. There is no single event that caused this. There was no volcanic eruption, no single decisive battle. It was a slow-motion unraveling. Imagine yourself years later, returning for some reason to the place that was once your world. You stand at the edge of the great plaza. The first thing that strikes you is the silence, a silence so profound it is a physical presence. The roar of the ceremonial crowd is gone. The thud of the drums, the chatter of the market, the scraping of 1,000 grinding stones, all have been replaced by the whisper of the wind through the crumbling temple combs and the relentless hum of the jungle. You walk into the plaza. The limestone paving stones are cracked, with resilient green shoots pushing their way through. A thick carpet of moss is growing on the steps of the pyramid your king once ascended. A massive fig tree has taken root in the central staircase, its powerful roots slowly, patiently prying the stone blocks apart. This place that was built to defy time is being systematically unmade by it. You see a flash of color, and a jaguar, the sacred animal of kings, pads silently across the open space, not even bothering to give you a glance. The landlords have changed. He and his kind seem to enjoy the new lack of political rallies and noisy neighbors. You wander into what was once the palace. The plaster on the walls has flaked away, revealing the rough stone beneath. In one room, a beautiful painted mural of courtly life is obscured by a curtain of hanging vines. The wooden roof beams rotted away long ago, leaving the rooms open to the sky. You walk through your old neighborhood and find your family's patio. The daub has washed away from the walls, leaving the skeletal lattice of the wattle exposed. A broken pot lies half buried in the soil where your mother once left it. Everything seems frozen in a state of quiet interruption. Lolian, why did this happen? It is the great question, and even centuries later, no one has a single, simple answer. Historians and archaeologists still debate what the final tipping point was in the classic Maya collapse. There is strong evidence for a series of prolonged, catastrophic droughts that crippled the agricultural system. There is clear proof of escalating, endemic warfare that destabilized the political landscape. Others point to outbreaks of disease, the collapse of critical long-distance trade routes, or the possibility that the society had simply become too complex. its ruling elite too disconnected from the practical realities of survival, making it fatally brittle in the face of crisis. Most likely, it wasn't one of these things, but a perfect terrible storm of all of them crashing down at once. You turn your back on the silent stone ghost of your past. You walk back into the jungle towards the small, resilient community you now call home. You did not vanish. The Maya people did not disappear. The grand, top-heavy experiment of divine kings and soaring pyramids had failed. But the people endured. You adapted. You learned to live in smaller, more scattered settlements, relying on your intimate knowledge of the forest. Your earliest ancestors did. As you walk, you think of the rise and the fall not as a straight line, but as a cycle, just like the turning of your sacred calendar. And here, in the green twilight of the jungle, a new cycle is already beginning.